Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we're diving into a fascinating new tool for language teachers. Imagine an AI assistant that doesn't just grade papers, but actually helps you build your next lesson plans from those papers. Let's see how it works. So here's our roadmap. First, we'll talk about the grading gauntlet, something every teacher knows all too well. Then, we'll get into how this AI is actually fluent in teaching methods. We'll break down its step-by-step process for turning student mistakes into a real action plan, see how it handles different languages, and then talk about its role as a co-corrector. We'll wrap it all up by looking at what this means for the future of feedback.
All right, let's kick things off with a challenge that I'm sure is familiar to every language teacher out there: the grading gauntlet. And it's not just about the sheer number of papers. It's about the quality of the feedback you can give when you're swamped.
Yeah, does this look familiar? That feeling of just being buried under an endless sea of essays, assignments, and exams? It's a huge pain point for sure, but the real challenge runs a lot deeper than just the clock.
Because here's the thing, the hardest part isn't just circling mistakes. It's giving feedback that's consistent from one student to the next, that's totally fair, and that is genuinely constructive. Feedback that shows a student exactly how to get better. And doing that right takes a massive amount of time and mental energy. So what can we do about it? Well, this is where a completely new kind of AI assistant enters the picture. And I want to be clear, this is not just another grammar checker. This thing is fluent in pedagogy. It actually understands the art and science of how to teach a language. The whole system is built on this foundation, the CECRL, or the Common European Framework of Reference for Languages. If you're in the language world, you know this is the international gold standard for measuring ability, all the way from a total beginner at A1 up to full mastery at C2. This framework is basically the AI's guiding brain. And check out what it can do with that knowledge. It doesn't just say, this is wrong. It knows that a certain error is pretty typical for a B1 student, but maybe a bigger deal for a B2 student. It can tell the difference between a tiny slip-up and a mistake that completely blocks communication. And this is huge. It can look at your whole class and actually group students together based on the kinds of mistakes they're all making. So this brings us to the really cool part, how it all works. There's a structured 4-step process here that basically transforms grading from a chore into a strategic teaching tool. It literally turns your students' errors into your next action plan. It's a simple 4-step flow. First, it analyzes the work, identifying and sorting every single error it finds. Next, it regroups those individual mistakes into bigger patterns, the key skill gaps. From there, it targets those specific gaps by generating training modules. And finally, it delivers all this to you in formats you can use in the classroom tomorrow. Let's zoom in on that regroup step, because this is where the teaching intelligence really shines. It doesn't just give you a long list of grammar mistakes. It spots the bigger picture issues. Are a lot of students struggling with linguistic mastery, things like verb tenses? Or is it maybe discursive competence, like they can't organize their ideas logically? It could even be pragmatic competence, like using the wrong tone for an email. It's so much deeper than just right versus wrong. And then, based on those patterns, the AI suggests these super concrete lesson modules. If it sees that student essays are all over the place, it might create a module on structuring a text to be understood. If it notices your students are stuck in a rut, it could generate one on moving from B1 to B2. These are real, actionable lesson plans that come directly from your students' actual work.
Okay, so you might be wondering, how far does this go? Is this just for one language or one type of assignment? Let's talk about the AI's versatility, because it's not just for French class, and it's not just for general essays. It's also trained on official high-stakes exams.
And one thing I really appreciate here is the transparency. They're totally upfront about the AI's reliability in different languages. For languages like French, English, and Spanish, it's very high. You can trust it for deep, fine-grained analysis. For German or Dutch, it's good for things like spotting common errors. And for languages like Chinese or Arabic, it's functional for general feedback. That kind of honesty really builds trust. You also get to be in the driver's seat when it comes to the teaching approach. You can tell the AI, hey, I want a normative correction, which means it will focus strictly on grammar rules and precision. Or you can ask for a communicative correction, where the priority is just, did the student get their message across successfully, even if there were a few small mistakes along the way? But this is a real game changer, especially for test prep. The AI has actually been trained on the official grading rubrics for major international language exams. For example, if your students are getting ready for the French DELF exam, the AI can grade their practice essays using the 4 official criteria. It'll look at their respect for the instructions, their coherence, and their control of vocabulary and grammar, and it'll give them feedback just like a certified examiner would.
And it's the exact same story for the Cambridge B2 first exam in English. The AI evaluates student writing based on those 4 official pillars: content, communicative achievement, organization, and language. This means your students get practice and feedback that is perfectly aligned with what the real examiners are looking for.
Now, all of this sounds incredibly powerful, and it probably brings up a big question. What does this mean for the teacher's role? Well, the key here is to think of this AI not as a replacement, but as a new kind of partner, your co-corrector.
And there are a bunch of smart, ethical ways to use it. You could have the AI do the first pass, with you as the teacher reviewing and finalizing its work, or use it as a pre-corrector to save you a ton of time. It can even act as a second opinion to check your own grading for consistency, or help an entire department of teachers get on the same page with their grading standards. And the source material is crystal clear on this point. It says, for any high-stakes, officially certified exam, the final call must remain human. The AI is an incredibly powerful assistant, but the teacher's professional judgment is, and should be, the final word. So let's bring this all home. What does a tool like this really mean for the future of feedback? Well, it signals a massive shift. A shift from just collecting data on how students performed to actively using that data for their development.
Think about it. When this process is done, you don't just get a grade. You get at least 5 concrete, useful things: a detailed breakdown for each student, a weakness map for the whole class, a full training plan to fix those weaknesses, ready-to-use worksheets, and targeted activities for your very next lesson. And that is the fundamental transformation. Evaluation stops being the final judgment, the end of the road. Instead, it becomes the very first step in a new, targeted learning plan. The grade is no longer the end of the conversation, it's the beginning.
And so I'll leave you with this question to think about. What if that next daunting stack of papers on your desk wasn't just a measure of what your students did in the past, but was actually the blueprint that automatically built your next month of super effective, perfectly targeted lesson plans? That's the future this tool is pointing us towards.